Language is just, it's incredible, isn't it? It's not just how we talk. It's this social radar, a signaling device.
A very sophisticated one.
Yeah. The words we choose, they instantly broadcast our intentions, our relationship to whoever's listening, maybe even our social status.
And we pick up on those signals completely unconsciously. You don't need a degree in linguistics to just know that residence feels cold and distant, while home feels...
warm.
Exactly. It's warm. It's immediate.
Okay, think about that exact pair. Residence versus home. Or another one, utilize versus use. Why does one sound like it belongs on a tax form and the other sounds like a friendly chat?
Right.
Why does saying approximately instead of just about suddenly make you sound like you're giving, I don't know, a legal deposition?
Well, these differences, they aren't just random choices. They're not just style. They are deep, really hardwired patterns in the English language. They reflect centuries of history, power shifts, and even just the physical way our mouths make sounds.
So if you're the kind of person who's intensely curious about this stuff, the listener who wants to know why some words seem to wear a suit and tie while others are happy in sweatpants, then this deep dive is for you.
Our mission today is to dig deeper than just the definitions. We're going to try and uncover the mechanism behind it all, the history, the psychology, the sound itself, and all the social rules that shape how we feel about formality.
And the sources we're using today are these fantastic excerpts on the history and structure of language registers. We're actually going to walk you through how a political mess in the 11th century still basically dictates the tone of your emails today.
And what's so fascinating is that the register of a word, whether it feels formal or casual, was often decided long before any of us were born. It was decided by wars and cultural forces. We're just living with and using that linguistic legacy. Okay, so let's unpack this.
All right, so if we really want to understand this strange duality in English, this formal versus casual thing, we have to start at the beginning, at the event that our sources call the linguistic Frankenstein.
That phrase is just perfect, isn't it? It captures the reality so well. English is pretty unique because it's literally stitched together from different and often competing sources.
It's not a smooth evolution.
Not at all. You look at Romance languages, they flow pretty cleanly from Latin. But English has these deep structural seams left over from major historical events.
And the biggest one, the one that created this permanent linguistic fault line, was the Norman conquest of 1066. Our sources call it not just a political shift, but a linguistic earthquake. It completely reshaped the entire hierarchy of how people spoke.
It did. When William the Conqueror won at Hastings, the whole power structure in England just flipped. The Normans, who spoke a kind of old French with heavy Latin roots, they became the new ruling class.
Right.
And for the next 3 centuries, French was the language of everything important. The court, the law, the church, high culture. It became the sound of power and prestige.
So what happened to the English that was already there?
It got demoted. The conquered Anglo-Saxons, with their Germanic language, their tongue was pushed down. It became the language of, everyday life, of farming, of manual labor, the language of the powerless, really.
And this wasn't just for a few years.
No, and this is the critical point. It lasted for nearly 300 years. That's more than enough time for that class divide to get completely baked into the vocabulary itself.
So English, the Germanic stuff, was low status.
And French, the Latinate stuff, was high status. So when the two languages finally started merging back together into what we call Middle English, they didn't smooth each other out. They fused, and they kept their old status markers.
And you could see that class divide so clearly in what our sources call the culinary divide. This example is just... it's so vivid.
It is, because it shows the physical distance between the classes. Think about it. Who's out in the fields, in the mud, with the animals?
The Anglo-Saxon farmers.
Exactly. So the words for the live animals are their words. They're short, they're casual, they're Germanic. Words like cow, pig, sheep, deer, common, everyday words.
But then what happens when those animals are cooked?
Well, once they're brought to the castle kitchens, butchered and served as these expensive meals on the Norman nobles' tables, the language flips to French. The refined, expensive dish gets the formal vocabulary.
Beef.
From oof, from pork. Mutton from mouton. Venison from venison. The messy, living animal was casual and Anglo-Saxon. The refined, plated dish was formal and French.
The pattern is just unmistakable. The language of physical work is Germanic. The language of refinement and consumption is French.
It's the core principle.
Okay, I have to stop you there because I have a question about a famous exception. If the ruling class The powerful people all spoke French. Why is the most important title king? A short Anglo-Saxon word. Why didn't that switch to something from French?
That's a brilliant question. And it shows that this isn't a simple 100% rule. It's about how the language is fused. The Normans, they were smart. They knew they needed some political continuity, so they often kept core, high-status Anglo-Saxon terms that were really deeply rooted in the land.
So king and queen were too important to change.
Exactly. They were essential to the idea of English identity, so they kept their status. But the machinery of the government, words like parliament, justice, treasury, that became overwhelmingly French. The power structure was French, but the figurehead's title stayed rooted in the old tongue.
That makes a lot of sense. So the pattern isn't totally rigid, but the general trend holds up, especially when we look at the split between visceral concepts and abstract ones.
Absolutely. The words for the most basic human experiences, the body, raw emotions, direct actions, they stayed short, direct, Germanic. Think about words for your body. Gut, nose, sweat.
Primal words.
Yes, or primal emotions, love, hate, fear.
And you can compare every single one of those to their formal, usually multi-syllable Latinate versions that we use for clinical or official stuff. A doctor doesn't talk about your gut.
No, they talk about your intestines or abdomen. You don't sweat in a formal report. You perspire. You don't just hate something in a legal document. You detest it. That Latinate word detestation abstracts the feeling away from the raw emotion.
And that's a key function, right? That distance.
It's a crucial function. That Latinate vocabulary gives us the language we need for objectivity. You can't write a legal contract using the messy, emotional word fight. You have to use the precise, detached word combat or litigation. It allows us to be clinical.
And then, as if the Norman conquest wasn't enough to create this split, we went and added another layer of formality during the Renaissance.
Right. This was a much more deliberate effort. It wasn't about conquest. It was about scholarship. Scholars purposefully started reviving classical Latin and Greek terms to enrich the language.
And these are the words that really feel extra formal.
Oh, yeah. They almost shout their formality because they were chosen specifically because they weren't common. We're talking about words like pulchritude for beauty.
Right, which no one says.
No one says it. Or expectorate for spit. Or my personal favorite, defenestration.
The act of throwing someone out a window.
A wonderfully specific and formal word. The formality of these words is directly tied to how rare they are and their connection to academia. If you use pulchritude, you are consciously signaling your level of education.
Even if you're being a little ironic about it.
Especially if you're being ironic.
So this whole Frankenstein nature of English, it's right there in the numbers.
It is. When linguists break down where the words in our dictionary come from, it's surprisingly balanced. It's about 29% from French, 29% from Latin, and 26% from Germanic roots. It really is a fusion.
But just counting the words in the dictionary is only half the story. The real key is frequency, right? How often we actually use them.
That's the crucial part. While the dictionary is mixed, the words that make up the vast majority of our daily speech, something like 80 to 90% that we actually say, are overwhelmingly those short, powerful Anglo-Saxon words.
Get versus obtain.
Perfect example. We say get all the time. We only say obtain when the situation demands a certain level of formality. The sheer commonness of the Anglo-Saxon words locks them into that casual register. The less frequent Latinate words feel more deliberate, more chosen, and therefore more formal.
And this whole system, this history, it becomes this amazing toolkit for writers. They play with this duality all the time.
Constantly. You can see it in different literary philosophies. George Orwell, for instance, was famously suspicious of Latinate jargon. He saw it as a way to obscure the truth, to make things sound impressive but be intentionally vague.
He was a big fan of short, punchy Anglo-Saxon words.
He was, for clarity and for moral force.
The source has this great example where he took a passage from the Bible, which is already full of this clear, powerful prose. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. And he rewrote it in this ridiculously pompous Latinate style. Something like, objective consideration of contemporary phenomena compels the conclusion that success or failure in competitive activities exhibits no tendency to be commensurate with innate capacity.
It just sucks all the life out of it. One is immediate and powerful. The other is detached and bureaucratic. And that's why a writer like Hemingway leans so heavily on that sparse, direct Anglo-Saxon style. It gives the writing a raw, emotional punch.
But then you have the academic world, where that Latinate prose is often necessary.
And that's the other side of it. While critics like Orwell might call it pretentious, academics often need that Latinate vocabulary for precision. A word like photosynthesis has a very specific technical meaning that avoids the messy, multiple meanings that a short Anglo-Saxon word might pick up over time.
And then, of course, there's Shakespeare.
The master of blending them. He was writing at the perfect time when the two streams of language had fully integrated, and he used both masterfully.
When he wants emotional impact, he goes for the raw, visceral Anglo-Saxon words. In Hamlet's big soliloquy, the slings and arrows, those are such direct, earthy images. They hit you.
They do. But he embeds those powerful, simple words within a very sophisticated, formal, dramatic structure, using Latinate words for the big, overarching philosophical ideas. He was leveraging the entire history we've been talking about. He knew which words felt like reality and which ones felt like philosophy.
It gives English speakers this incredible ability to dial in the exact nuance they want.
Absolutely.
Let's run through a few more of those word pairs that really show the choice.
Okay. How about asking questions? You can ask, or you can inquire, or you can interrogate.
Very different vibes.
Completely. Ask is casual, spontaneous. Inquire feels more structured, like what a journalist does. And interrogate, well, that's adversarial, high stakes.
And with money, buy versus purchase or acquire.
Right. You buy groceries, a business purchases new equipment, a massive corporation acquires a competitor. The formality of the word matches the weight of the transaction.
And even just thinking. Think versus cogitate or ponder.
You think about what to have for lunch. You ponder a deep philosophical question. The Latinate words demand more time, more mental effort.
It's just amazing that a power dynamic from almost 1,000 years ago is still coded into how we feel about these words right now.
That's it, exactly. That history created the template. It's in the linguistic DNA.
Okay, so history explains where the split came from. But here's the thing. If you hear a word you've never encountered before, you can often just know. You can instantly feel if it's formal or casual just from the sound. How does that work?
This is where we get into phonology, the study of speech sounds. And it plays this huge subconscious role in how we perceive register, sometimes completely separate from the word's history. A lot of it comes down to the physical effort involved and the acoustic quality of the word itself.
And I guess the most obvious place to start is just length, how long the word is.
Yeah, length and weight. Formal words are almost always longer, and that's not a coincidence. It's part of the design. More syllables take more time to say and more time to process. It signals deliberation.
About versus approximately.
Perfect. 2 syllables versus 5. The longer word automatically sounds more careful, more precise.
And that length often comes from how Latin and French words are built, right? With all the prefixes and suffixes.
Exactly. Instead of one single hard root word, you get all these parts stacked together. Determination. Unbelievable. The construction itself, adding all those pieces, increases the syllable count and acoustically makes the concept feel more complex, more elevated.
But the really subtle stuff is in the consonants. The difference between like a punchy sound and a smooth flowing sound. This is where it gets into how the word physically feels in your mouth.
Yes. So casual Anglo-Saxon words tend to love what we call plosives and fricatives. Plosives sounds like PDA, KG, sounds where you stop the air completely and then it explodes out.
They're punchy.
They're punchy, they're abrupt, sometimes aggressive. Think of the words kick, gut, fight. They feel direct and present. You're using the most physically forceful sounds your mouth can make.
Okay, so that's the casual sound. What's the formal one?
The formal Latinate words prefer liquids and sibilants. Liquids are the smooth, flowing sounds like L and R. Sibilants are the hissing sounds like S or a soft C.
Like in facilitate.
Facilitate, serene, luxurious. They literally take less percussive effort to say. They sound smoother, more flowing, and because of that, more refined.
So the sound profile of casual language is hard, percussive. And formal language is smooth, almost melodic.
It's a texture difference, and our brains pick up on it instantly. The hard sounds feel immediate. The smooth sounds feel more detached, which is perfect for a formal discussion where you don't want that immediate emotional punch.
And vowels play a role in this feeling of detachment, too. Yeah. Especially something called the schwa.
Right. The vowels in casual words are often tense, big sounds where your mouth moves a lot, like the ow in house. They're sounds with a lot of intensity.
But formal words are full of this, schwa, which is just that neutral, mumbled sound.
The schwa is so interesting because it's phonetically neutral. It's the sound in unstressed syllables, like the A in about, or the second syllable in admin is traumation. Using a lot of schwas, which you do in long Latinate words, kind of drains the phonetic drama out of the word. That neutrality creates detachment, which reinforces the objective formal status you want in, say, academic speech.
And then there's the rhythm, the stress patterns.
This is a huge marker of Latinate words. They often put the stress on the penultimate syllable, the second to last one. Think about it. Determ in apinity, academimi. That rhythm itself sounds educated, sophisticated. It has a certain cadence that we associate with formality.
It sounds like what you're describing is that the sound of the word is often iconic. The sound actually mimics the meaning.
Precisely. Iconicity just amplifies the register. Contrast the sound of crash, short, sharp, plosive with collision.
Collision is so much longer, smoother.
It's longer, smoother, heavier. The sound itself reflects the seriousness and complexity of the event.
You even see this in made-up words, like the internet slang word glump. It's short, starts with that hard G sound. Just sounds playful and informal.
And you couldn't use glump in a legal document. You'd have to use a phrase like aggressively embrace the plaintiff. The formal phrase uses softer sounds, more syllables, and takes longer to say. It sounds more measured.
The last piece of this is speech reductions, things like gonna and wanna.
Yes. In casual speech, we're all about efficiency. We mash words together. Gonna, wanna, have to. But formality demands the full, clear articulation of every single syllable. Going to, want to, have to. Just resisting those natural shortcuts is an immediate signal that you've shifted into a higher register.
It's just wild that our mouths are physically working in a different way, just to project a certain social status through language.
It is, and it's because of that history, that collision of Germanic and Latinate sound patterns, that English has this incredible sonic toolbox.
Okay, so we've got the historical roots, the why the words are different, and we've got the phonology, the how they sound different. Now we need to layer in context. How do social rules and the actual meaning of a word, the semantics, tell us which one to choose?
This is where we get into sociolinguistics. And if you zoom out, you can see that formal language is, at its core, a tool for managing abstraction and emotional distance.
How does that distance work in a practical sense?
Well, formal words tend to deal in concepts rather than raw feelings. This lets us talk about difficult or painful things without triggering that immediate visceral gut punch that so many Anglo-Saxon words have.
Like die.
Exactly. Die is short, stark, immediate. Compare that to demise or pass away. Demise takes the biological event and turns it into a more conceptual, formal ending. It creates a buffer.
And that buffer is essential in professional fields, law, science, medicine.
Absolutely. You have to maintain objectivity. A scientific paper can't just say something is beautiful because that word is loaded with emotion. It might use aesthetic or even pulchritudinous to abstract the idea of beauty into a formal clinical discussion about structure.
And beyond just the dictionary definition, the connotations, all the associated meanings are huge signals for register.
Oh, definitely. Think about positive versus negative connotations. We talked about slender, which is formal, and positive, suggesting grace. But if you want to describe the same body type casually and maybe with a negative edge, you'd use skinny.
Or bony.
Or bony, same basic size, but the register and the emotional baggage are worlds apart.
This is where euphemisms come in, which are this fascinating mix of formality and social awkwardness.
Euphemisms are basically formal language used to hide from taboos. When a direct Anglo-Saxon word makes us uncomfortable, words about death or bodily functions or sex my fex, we retreat to longer, more abstract Latinate words to create a little veil of politeness.
The patient expired.
Exactly. The subject passed away. It's an attempt to formalize the stark reality of death to make it less painful.
We also see that just how common a word is can dictate its formality, even if it has nothing to do with 1066.
Yes. Rarity equals formality. The less common a word is, the more specialized and therefore more formal it feels. If you use the word quotidian instead of daily,
You sound very smart.
you sound smart, and you're elevating the register just by choosing the rarer Latinate word over the common Anglo-Saxon one every day. It signals that you're tapping into a more specialized, educated vocabulary.
We should also touch on how a word's register can change over time. The source uses the example of intercourse.
That's a great one. Intercourse used to be a completely neutral formal word. It just meant communication or exchange. You talk about diplomatic intercourse. But through common usage and a very specific cultural context, its meaning has narrowed and been pulled so strongly toward a sexual connotation that it's almost unusable in its original formal sense in everyday speech.
So usage can actually beat etymology.
It can. It shows how language is always shifting.
Okay, let's zoom out to the bigger picture of sociolinguistics, the idea of register itself.
Right. Register is the key idea here. It's basically the idea that we choose our language depending on who we're talking to, why we're talking, and where we are. The linguist Martin Jews broke this down into 5 specific levels that are really helpful.
All right, let's walk through them. What's at the very top, the most formal?
At the top is the frozen register. This is language that is fixed, it's structured, it's often ceremonial, it doesn't change. Think of a wedding vow, the Pledge of Allegiance, the text of a religious prayer. You can't alter it.
Okay, and one step down from that is formal.
The formal register is for planned, one-way communication to a public audience. It uses complete sentences, very structured grammar, no slang, no contractions. Think of a graduation speech, a scholarly lecture, or a public address by a politician.
Then we get to consultative, which sounds like where a lot of work happens.
It is. This is the language of professional settings. It's a bit less rigid than formal, so there's some back and forth, but it's all about maintaining respect and distance. It's the language between a doctor and a patient, or a boss and an employee.
And below that is casual.
That's the language of friends and family. It's all about speed and efficiency. Slang, inside jokes, contractions, filler words, it all thrives here. It signals closeness and solidarity.
And the last one is intimate.
Intimate language is reserved for our closest relationships. It's super abbreviated, full of private vocabulary, nonverbal cues. It would be totally meaningless to an outsider. It's the language that runs on maximum shared context.
And our choice of which register to use depends on the topic, the relationship, and whether we're speaking or writing.
Exactly. And formal language isn't just about vocabulary. It's also about using specific, complex grammatical structures. The passive voice is a perfect example. Instead of saying the scientist analyzed the data, which is direct, the formal paper says the data was analyzed. It removes the person, the agent, to create objectivity.
And then there's the dreaded nominalization, turning verbs into these big, clunky nouns.
The ultimate tool of bureaucracy. Instead of saying, we decided to investigate, the formal memo says, the initiation of an investigation was decided upon. It adds syllables and abstracts the simple act of investigating into this dense, conceptual thing.
So fundamentally, all these choices are social signals.
That's what it boils down to. Formal language signals respect, hierarchy, distance. Casual language signals solidarity, equality, closeness.
And it's interesting how English does this mostly with vocabulary, while other languages have completely different systems.
Right. Languages like Japanese or Korean have explicit honorifics built into their grammar. You have to use a different verb form depending on who you're talking to. For them, formality is grammatical. For us, it's a choice we make by swapping out an Anglo-Saxon word for a Latinate one.
This whole landscape must be changing so fast with digital communication.
It's incredibly fluid. We see register mixing all the time now. Think about an email to a new client. You start with the formal Dear Mr. Smith, but you might end with the super casual Cheers. You're blending registers that a generation ago would have never touched. The rules are changing in real time.
Okay, so let's try to bring all of this together. We've got the history, we've got the sound, we've got the social context. How does the brain actually process this dual-layered language?
Well, psychologically, all that stuff about complexity and frequency we talked about, it translates directly into cognitive load, how hard your brain has to work.
So formal words are literally harder to process.
They process slower, yeah. Because they're longer, they're more complex, and we encounter them less often, the brain has to spend a little extra time figuring them out. A word like deconstruction has all these parts, a prefix, a root, a suffix, that your brain has to assemble. It triggers a more analytical mode of thinking.
Whereas a simple word like use is just instant.
It's processed almost as a single unit. It's high frequency. But utilization, that makes the brain work a tiny bit harder, and we register that extra work as cognitive weight or seriousness.
So the word's very structure forces our brain to slow down and be more analytical.
Exactly. And beyond that, our brains make these incredibly powerful and very fast associations between formality, authority, and prestige.
How does that link get wired in?
It starts really early. Our first encounters with these big, multisyllabic Latinate words are almost always in settings of authority. Textbooks, legal forms, lectures from teachers, formal exams. This constant pairing creates a mental shortcut. Complex vocabulary equals intellectual status. It carries this association of, pay attention, this is important, this is expert knowledge.
And that's reinforced by the sound symbolism we talked about earlier. The softer flowing sounds feel more refined.
It seems like our brains have this intuitive link. Smooth, extended sounds feel more thoughtful, while those hard, percussive sounds feel more like immediate, raw action. You combine that intuitive feeling with all the learned associations from school and society, and you get our complete perception of formality.
And there are studies on this, right? On how we perceive people who use formal language.
Yes, and they show this fascinating double-edged sword. When someone uses complex Latinate words appropriately for the context, they are consistently rated as being more intelligent, more educated, more credible.
What?
But, and this is the crucial part, if the context doesn't call for it, that same vocabulary is immediately perceived as pretentious, arrogant, or aloof.
So if you're at a party and you say, I shall endeavor to facilitate the immediate acquisition of additional beverages, instead of, I'll go get some more drinks,
you're going to get some looks. Because your brain is constantly running this check. Does the language match the social setting? And when there's a mismatch, it creates this immediate discomfort. It can alienate people. The most effective communicators are masters at dialing their register up or down to match the room.
That feels like something bilingual speakers must be especially good at.
They are hyper-attuned to it. They're constantly switching not just languages, but formality levels within those languages. For a native speaker, a lot of this is unconscious. But if you're in a meeting and a manager suddenly uses really intimate slang, it creates this linguistic glitch. Everyone feels that something is off, even if they can't say, oh, he just violated the consultative register.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive, it feels like we have to acknowledge that English isn't static. This whole formality landscape is being pulled in two different directions at once right now.
It really is. We're seeing these extreme forces of both casualization and formalization happening at the same time.
So on one side, you have the digital world, social media, texting. It's created this ultra-casualization language that's all about speed and shared context.
Words like lit, sus, ghosting, a whole new casual vocabulary that has nothing to do with historical roots.
And then on the other side, you have the corporate and bureaucratic world, which is driving this hyper-formalization through dense, often kind of meaningless jargon.
Synergize, optimize workflows, holistic integration. It's this Latinate language that's often used to signal expertise and control, sometimes, as Orwell warned, at the expense of actually being clear.
So it's constantly evolving.
It is. But ultimately, this formal-casual duality, the one that got its start way back with that invasion in 1066, is still the defining strength of the English language. It gives us this incredible scale for nuance. It lets us choose our words not just for what they mean, but for the exact social and emotional effect we want to have.
And understanding this whole system allows you, the listener, to use that scale intentionally. Every time you write an important email or just decide whether to say start or commence.
So to really synthesize what we've talked about, it's helpful to remember those three core pillars that determine the formality of pretty much every word you hear. First, the historical roots, that class divide from the Norman conquest that linked Germanic words to the everyday and Latinate words to prestige. Second, the sonic properties, the physical stuff, the length of the word, the punchy versus flowing consonants, the rhythm of the stress patterns. And third, the social and contextual register, the rules dictated by your relationship to your audience and the seriousness of the situation.
And having that knowledge is like having a decoder ring for the world. You can instantly hear the unspoken social signals, the emotional distance that's baked into every conversation. You now know that when someone shifts from short Anglo-Saxon words to long Latinate ones, they are, whether they know it or not, changing the cognitive weight and the emotional temperature of the entire exchange.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. We know that original split was all about power. The conquering Normans dictated the language of power. So, if a new massive paradigm shift happened today, a technological or social revolution that completely changed who holds power and prestige.
Maybe the rise of some new global elite defined by a new technology or a new way of communicating.
Right. What common, short, simple Anglo-Saxon word that we use every day might suddenly get co-opted, formalized, and turn into dense, inaccessible jargon tomorrow, simply because that new powerful group adopted it as their own specific technical term? What word might move from the couch straight into the boardroom and become a formal term just because of who starts using it? Something to think about.